This is Mr. Jarrett, and in this video tutorial, we are going to be 3D modeling and assembling all of these parts in SolidWorks. So this is a storage cubby, and you can see here that I have this broken down into the parts that you would typically draw on your own as students. That's what I would assign you, and then the teacher demo side. But in this demonstration, I'm going to be doing everything. So some of the things that we're going to be learning here is basic cabinet design of how things can fit together and interlock so they all snap together using the CNC, okay, which is computer numeric control. If you have no clue what that means, basically we have a machine, a woodworking machine that will cut out of plywood or out of solid wood anything that you have on there that is flat, okay, so like all of these side pieces. So next, we're going to be learning how to mirror an assembly part. So this is a little bit different than what we'd be doing before. You're actually mirroring an entire part, not over a plane, but actually making a copy, and it's a whole new part file itself. So making parts in an assembly, that's new as well. Isolating a part, so making all the other ones disappear in an assembly. Pocket creation, so I'll kind of mention that later on, and CNC layout. Okay, so you'll notice for all of these, I don't necessarily have an origin anywhere. I don't care which direction you draw these. If you want to think ahead and think about which way they're going to be rotated and whatnot, you can. But for the most part, it's going to be straightforward. You'll see as we go. I'm going to start with this simple back piece, and I'm going to pull this to my other screen. And in SolidWorks, I'm going to create a new part file. And all of these parts are in IPS or inches, so you can double check in the bottom right-hand corner that your screen defaults to that. And since this is the back, I'm just going to draw this on the front plane. And I'll just make the origin right here in the bottom left-hand corner. So I'm going to draw with my rectangle up to the right. And then it says it has an overall width of 27 and an overall height of 27.625. And your computer is going to default to only 2 decimal places, but I will change it to show the exact amount of decimal places each time. That way, if you're busy and you're not hearing what I'm saying, you can actually see what it is on the screen. So it's 3 decimal places. Okay, Features tab and hit Extrude. And again, it doesn't matter if you go forward or backwards, but this is going to be a 0.25 thickness. Okay. And it just says that it has a default material. You can change this to a wood type or whatever material you want. I'm just going to leave mine as default. Okay, so File, Save As. Find my Storage Cubby folder, and I'm going to name this Back. And I can close out of that. And let's continue here. The next piece is going to be all of the face frame pieces. Now, you might have no clue what a face frame is, so I'm going to scroll back to this and kind of explain. So on a cabinet or any type of furniture that you normally make, you have all of your side pieces and your internal pieces, but then they put this extra trim that goes on the front. A lot of your furniture at home is not made out of solid wood on its sides or shelving. A lot of those are actually plywood. Okay, it's layers of wood glued together. So that you don't see that ply on the edge, they put this face frame. This is extra flat boards that are solid wood over top of it. Okay, it gives it a little bit of extra thickness, covers over that ugly plywood edge, and it kind of gives us a little bit of a frame look. So all of these tiny little pieces floating here are face frame pieces. So since they are all pretty small, I have them all drawn on just one page here. It says note all material thickness is 0.75. So you can see here there's the vertical face frame, the small one, the horizontal one, and then what's called the kick plate, and that's this bottom piece right here. So it's right here in the front. So these are all individual part files. So once again in SolidWorks, let's make a new part. And I'm just going to sketch right here on the front plane. Draw with my rectangle tool right from the origin up. And I'm going to start on the left on that page. So it said the first one here, which is the vertical big face frame piece, that has a height of 30.5, so 30.5, and an overall width of 1 1/4. Then I'll go to extrude it, and it says it has material thickness of 0.75. Okay. And I can save this. Again, I'm keeping the default setting. So instead of writing face frame each time, I'm just going to write FF, vertical big, and I saved it. Now you could make a new part, or since they're all extruded to the same thickness, I'm just going to go back and edit my original sketch. But if this confuses you, just make a new part. So editing my original sketch, all I really need to do here to go to the vertical small one is change this 30.5 to 12. It has the exact same width and everything. And if I hit return, it's got the same thickness. Now I can hit File, Save As, and I can change this to vertical small. I think it's a lot faster just to edit my sketch when I have similar objects. So again, you can make a new part file, but I am going to just edit my sketch, and I'm going to move on here to the face frame horizontal piece. So this time, since it's horizontal, the 12 needs to go to 1.25. The width of it, so that's the top 1.25, gets changed to 25.25. 25.25. So now it is lengthwise. It's going sideways. I can hit return because it's still got the same thickness. And File, Save As. And this is the face frame horizontal. And the last one is the kick plate. So I'll edit my sketch. And here we have a little bit of editing to do. So you can do this in a lot of different ways, but if you notice that the horizontal width is the exact same, okay, and the height obviously is different. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of draw the bottom part of this and then just trim, okay. So I'm going to change this to 4. That's the overall height. And then I'll draw my bottom part, and then I'll trim this bottom line away. Again, you can do this in a lot of different ways. So the first thing I'll do is get my 3-point arc, and just somewhere on this line, I'll click, kind of click here, and just draw an arc. I'll do the same thing over here. Get my align tool and connect the two. Hit escape. Then I'm going to trim this bottom line. So that's just how my mind works. Maybe you wanted to do that a completely different way, but I think that's pretty quick. So now we just need to change some of our relations. So where this arc goes into the line, so that little dot, or if you hold in Shift and select the line and the arc, that is going to be tangent. And it's going to be the same thing on the other side. So I hit escape, and then I held in Shift again, and I selected the horizontal line and the other arc, and I'm going to make that tangent. And why I'm saying this here, you do want to make sure that this line that's going across is actually set to horizontal. Mine was already defaulted to that, so you should change yours if yours is not. So this is still blue because we need to change some other things yet. So the first thing we need to change is the size of these arcs, but I noticed that both of them are the same size. So I will select both of them and set them to equal. And then I'm just going to dimension one. And in the picture, it has the one on the right dimensioned, so I'll just do that so it's easy to follow. That's going to be a measurement of 2 inches. And then it says from the far left side to this center point of this arc is 3.25. Now that's going to be the same thing on both sides. So even though it doesn't have it on the actual picture, it is the same thing on both sides. So you can dimension the other one as well. So it's from the center point to the far right line, 3.25. Now it's still blue. So if you move this around, you grab a dot and you start moving it around, you can kind of see why. The center points aren't really locked into place. So these center points need to be straight across from this bottom horizontal line. So this is a perfect half circle or a quarter circle. So I have that center point selected. I'm going to hold in Shift and select this horizontal line, and I'll make that coincident. And that should bring it down and lock it in. And it actually does it on both sides because this wraps up. It's tangent to a horizontal line and tangent again. So it automatically sets the other side as the same thing. So now this is fully defined, so we can hit return from sketch. And once again, this is the same thickness of 0.75, so this should be fully defined. So we can go up to File and Save As, and this is the kick plate. Okay. Now I'm going to close out of this because the next two parts are completely different. So the next two parts are the dividers. So you have a bottom divider and a top divider. Okay, so if I scroll up here so you can see, these are the dividers that kind of go in between the very base of it and the middle shelf and the top. So it's this one here and this one. So once again, it is number 6 and number 5. Number 6 and number 5. And if you want to draw things in the orientation that they are in the assembly, you can see that these are obviously facing the opposite direction. So instead of drawing on the front plane for this, I'm going to actually draw on the right plane so that they're already rotated for me. So coming back down here, once again, we are going to just be putting the origin in the bottom left-hand corner. So in SOLIDWORKS, start a new part. And I'm going to be sketching on the right plane. Now, you could take your line tool and kind of sketch this whole entire thing out, but I look at it and I see, hey, there's one big rectangle and then a couple little ones at the top. So what I'll do is I'll get my rectangle tool, click on the origin and draw a rectangle up. And then up here at the top, with my rectangle tool, I'll just draw 3 more. Okay. Now the only thing with this is, there's actually 2 lines right here. Not just one, there's 2. So when we go to trim, you need to make sure that you click that spot twice. Now the nice thing about doing this is that you're actually going to see here, it sets all of these little lines to collinear already. So that is a very nice little trick of why I did that, because it saves you going through and setting all of those. Then it does show you here, there's a little kind of diagram that says A equals B. So just to kind of show you this little space here, I have that labeled as A, and B says A equals B. So these are equal. And then the rest is pretty much dimensioned. So this outside, it says 1.2. This outside, 1.2. So they're also equal. And then the spacing in between is 1.4. So A and B are 1.4. So just follow along here with me as far as the dimensions go. So from the bottom all the way up to the top, so we'll just do the overall height first. It says it's 13.225. Kind of an odd number, and I'll explain why that is later. Then from the bottom to this small horizontal line is 12.875. Okay. Now you notice here, the overall height one, it adjusted only the middle one. That's because these top lines are not collinear. So let's hold in Shift and select the top 3 rectangles and make them collinear. And it should bring them back down to size. Now, like it shows in the diagram, these 2 middle sections are equal. So I'll select both of those, set them to equal. And the outside 2 horizontal lines are also equal. Okay. Now I can change their measurements. So this one is 1.2. The space right here is 1.4. And the overall width, so from the far left to the far right, is going to be 11.25. So if I just look at why these are still blue, it shows that I can still slide these in. So it doesn't necessarily show this in the diagram, but what that means is that these top pieces should also be set to equal. Okay, so now we basically have equal spacing the whole way across, except for, there's different lines that are equal to one another. So this is fully defined. There's nothing down here at the bottom that we need to do. So go to the Features tab and hit Extrude. And it shows that this is 0.75 thick. I'm going to go File, Save As. And that's going to be my bottom divider. Once again, you could go through changing this or closing this and making a new part. I like to just edit my sketch. I'll bring this back in, and there's some things that we need to delete. So I'm going to delete this overall height and this measurement, the other overall height. And I'm just going to take these and drag these dots down. Drag these dots down. Go a lot further than that. Just had to zoom in and zoom out a little bit. Before I add any dimensions, I'm going to bring this picture back over here just to kind of show you why I did that. The top of this is very similar to the bottom of this. Same similar measurements. You notice there are no measurements, so it's just assuming that these are the exact same as far as left and right. The only difference here is that the measurements of the overall height here is slightly different. They're changed, and this time it measures from the bottom all the way up to the top, and this section down here actually has a defined height of 0.35. 0.35. Didn't say this before of 0.35, but if you do open up a calculator, which I have done here, and you type in these two measurements, as you can see, and you subtract them, it is 0.35. So this is defined here, but since I drug it all the way down like that, and we're dimensioning from the bottom, I added in this 0.35 here so that it's easier for you to understand. So looking at this picture, the one difference too is that there's these little tiny cutouts up at the top, and they are not equal to one another. One of them is 1, the other one is 0.75. So before I add in my measurements, I am just going to kind of cut those rectangles out. So I'll just use the line tool for this. I'll just go over and up, hit escape, get my line tool again, do the same thing. Then I'll get trim entities and I'll trim those corners off. Okay, green check. Now, everything went blue because we trimmed the line that connects it to the origin. So as you can see, this can still move left or right. So before I dimension this, I want to kind of reconnect those. So I'm going to select this line, hold in Shift, select the origin, and I'll set them to coincident. So saying if this line were to continue, it's going to hit that origin. We'll do the same thing with the top line and the origin. Okay, that way we have two defined lines that we can kind of work off of. So this line here and the other little line, they are going to be collinear of one another, so straight across from one another, and I can dimension these. We already said that this is going to be 1 inch. The other one here is 0.75. See why I was getting that warning. So when I was drawing these lines, SolidWorks automatically projected that I wanted this line lined up with this corner. That's why there's a coincident right here. So you can see it's that line and this dot. I don't want that. So double check to make sure if you're getting any warnings. If you have some weird coincidences in here, these little symbols, just right click on them and hit delete. That's just something that SolidWorks automatically put in and I didn't tell it to. So let's try that again. So this now should be 0.75, and there you go, I don't get a warning, so that's good. Okay, so now I can do the overall heights. So we already talked about this bottom little section is 0.35, and from the bottom all the way up to this little cutout, this little line, it's going to be 13.6. From the bottom up to this line, which I know it's strange, it should correct itself, is going to be 13.975. All right, so it corrected itself. And the reason why I just did what it did there on my screen is because we have this top line coincident with the origin. We didn't necessarily do that one. And since we were dimensioning from the bottom up, it just took this line and jumped it way up past the origin. But when we readjusted and told this measurement that it's bigger than the other one, it just brought that back down. So long story short, this looks good. Okay, it's all fully defined now. So I can hit return from sketch, and this is already 0.75 thick. So then I can go file, save as, and I can save this as top divider. I'm going to close out of that part, and I'm going to pull my screen back over here so you can see. Now moving on, this is actually the part where I would normally step in a normal class and we would start working together. So this is the top part, and this one's a little bit more complicated. You see there's some detailed views, some fancy measurements. They're not just simple rectangular parts. This is a rectangle, but it's got a lot of fancy edges and cutouts and whatnot to it. So we're going to do this together in this video as well. And since this is the top part, okay, it's this piece right here, I'm going to draw it on the top plane. That makes sense. Okay, and I'll just put the origin in the bottom left-hand corner. Doesn't have to be anything specific like in the middle or anything like that. The one thing I do want to point out, if you didn't see this note on your own, down here it says note TYP means typical. So anything that looks similar to a measurement labeled TYP is the same measurement. So as you can see here, like 10.5 TYP, these aren't measured, but they look identical to it. So they are also the same measurement. Sometimes they show this in measurements and drawings. Sometimes they do not. For instance, like here, this probably could have been labeled TYP or similar to bottom divider. There could have been a little note there. I just kind of forgot to put that in. So let's pull this to the other screen, start a new part. And once again, we are going to be sketching on the top plane this time, the top plane. Get my rectangle tool, click on my origin, just draw out to the right. The overall measurement of this, it says, is 30.75. And the overall height, or in this case, is depth actually, because we're looking down from the top view, is 13. Go to the Features tab and hit Extrude. Has a thickness of 0.75. So I have my basic rectangle. Now there are a bunch of little steps that we're going to do to get this fancy edge around it. So the first step is looking at it and thinking through how are we going to do that. So the fancy edge itself is only on 3 sides. So it's on both ends and just the front. Okay, it's not on the back because this is a piece of furniture. So the back of it would be flat so it can go up against the wall. So this fancy edge, if you know anything about woodworking, would be done with a router bit. Okay, and this is just a little round over router bit. So we are going to be filleting the top, so here all the way over and there, to this measurement, this 0.1875. And that's going to help us understand the bottom. So on your Features tab, get Fillet, and this is going to be 0.1875. And we're going to click on this top edge here, the top front edge, and the top left edge over there, and hit the green check. And like I said, this is going to help us understand what's the bottom. So now we can see what's squared and what's rounded. Okay, because this is going to flip a whole bunch of times when we start to draw the rest. So then that cutout of this, the bottom little section of this, the fancier part, that is also on those same 3 sides. That is going to be done with a swept cut, So I'm going to get my sketch tool. I'm going to rotate around to the bottom, click on the bottom, and this is kind of hard to see right now because we're on the bottom of what sides are what. So if you didn't take note of how that rotated like this, something that you could do is change your view. So this is a solid view or solid display. Up here at the top, you can actually change it to wireframe or wireframe with hidden lines, and that shows you where these dotted lines are. If I go to a flat view, where these dotted lines are, that's where the actual filleted edges are. So I'm going to get my line tool, and on the far outside, I'm going to trace those same edges where those fillets are. Okay, and I'll hit Escape, meaning I'm not going to trace this bottom line because that is the back of the top piece. Kind of confusing here. So now that I have those 3 lines, I'll change my display style back to shaded with edges, just so it's solid. And I'm going to hit Return from Sketch. So if you know anything about the swept tool or the swept cut tool, it needs a path and a profile. So that is the path, okay? Those 3 edges. All right, as you can see, it's traced on the bottom. So I'm going to get my sketch tool once again. This time I'm going to rotate around to the back. So I should not see a filleted edge here. And I'm going to click on this flat back piece. Okay, so this is now going to be the profile. Make sure you are on the back. You are not on the front. You should not have a fillet right here. If you were to draw this right here, SolidWorks would get confused when you try to tell it to follow that path. It wouldn't know to cut left or to cut right. Okay, by doing it back here on the back, it's going to start at one edge of that path and wrap the whole way around. So I'm going to zoom in down here to the bottom right-hand corner of this back piece. And I'm choosing the bottom right-hand corner because my detailed view is in that same fashion. It's going to the right. Okay. Now, while we're looking at this, keep in mind, we actually need to draw the negative space. So what's going to be cut off? So yes, we are going to draw those arcs in this straight line, but we also need to connect it. So go over here to the corner and back up. So this is the negative space. This is what's going to be cut off. Okay, so start out just by getting your line tool. I'm going to go down on this horizontal line and just click somewhere. Go over to your origin and click, and up a little bit. You do not want to connect it to that yellow dot. That's the midpoint line, or where it turns into a fillet. You want to just be somewhere in between, somewhere on that line. Now, if you are good with the line tool, I've showed you this trick before. You can move your mouse over that end dot and wiggle it a little bit, and it does turn into an arc. And if it's the wrong arc, you move back over that dot, and it changes it again. So you can kind of just draw, once again, wiggle, and it turns into an arc. And there's the shape that you want. But if you're not good with the line tool, or you have no clue what I'm talking about, you can just hit escape once you get that vertical line drawn. Use your 3-point arc, and you can just manually draw that in. And we'll have to draw this one. Let me try that again. Go from there to here. And then you connect them with the line tool. Okay. And yes, you do need to make sure that this line is a vertical line. So both of these arcs we can set to equal right away. So select them and set them to equal. You might mess some things up here. You can readjust these dots so it looks a little bit better. We can put in some measurements. So it says this tiny little line in the middle is 0.0625. 0.0625. So that is a 1/16 of an inch. It says that the arcs are typical, so there's no measurement on there. That's because it's measured the fillet, but these are going to be the same. So we'll just set that to 0.1875, just like the fillet was. And now there's really no other measurements there. So we just need to change our relations. So hopefully this would stick out to you by now, but the center points are kind of just floating around. They're not anywhere specific, and that's what we need to fix. So let's set this center point here, or select that center point, hold in Shift in the bottom line, and we're going to make them coincident so it connects to it. Okay, and then I'll just click out in this white space. Then I'll click that center point again, hold in Shift, and I'm going to click the small vertical line, and I'll set those coincident. So by doing that, it makes this a quarter circle, a perfect quarter circle. I'm going to do that same thing for the top. Okay, so the center, hold in Shift, and the vertical line, make that coincident. It will straighten that out. You can select that center point again, and this dot, and make those horizontal. Now, why are we doing horizontal? Well, because it's straight across from it. This center point's not connected to a line like this one is. So you could do horizontal. That should fix it. If you didn't want to do horizontal, or maybe your computer already defaulted to it, another way of doing this is if you make this line and the side line tangent to one another, it's still doing is still making that dot horizontal because it's a perfect quarter circle. Okay, so either way, this should be fully defined now. So now we can hit return from sketch, and we have our profile. So it's all closed in, and we have a path. Okay, so we'll go up here to the Features tab and Swept Cut. And yours might already have something selected. I clicked out in the white space just to unselect it so I could explain this. So the first thing it's asking us for is that profile. So that's going to be this sketch. The second thing is the path. So if you rotate around, underneath you should have this edge. So if you don't know what edge to click on, you can always hit the drop down here, and it's going to be sketch 2. It's going to be the second sketch. And you see now it can follow that the whole way around. And this is Swept Cut. Green check, and it cuts that fancy edge the whole way around, which is pretty cool. So that looks nice. So the next thing we need to do to this is actually cut out these bottom pieces. Now in real life, the way you would do this would be by using a machine called a CNC that would actually cut these automatic to the actual depth that you want and everything. Okay, doing this by hand, you would have to set up a whole bunch of jigs and fixtures because this doesn't go all the way to the edge, as you can see. So there's also a little back lip here that's removed. That little tiny back lip, so as you can see, and I'll zoom in just so you can see it a little bit better. This tiny rectangle that's removed, that is where the back piece goes. Keep in mind we're looking at this from the top view. And these 3 pieces are where you have the left wall, the right wall, and that middle divider. Okay, so just to kind of come up here and show you. So that top piece, this goes up in, this goes up in, the divider goes up in. I'll zoom back out because this is hard to see. So that is all done on the bottom. That's why you can't see it here. We'll pull this over. And it's good to do that first section, or the first section of this would be the filleting and the routing, because when we draw on the bottom, it's going to flip this, and it's going to rotate it around. So I'm going to go underneath here, sketch, and I'll select the bottom. Okay. Now, like I said, this is kind of upside down from what your picture is. So you see my filleted edge here. So keep in mind, when you're looking at the picture, I'm actually drawing upside down. Okay. So the rectangle tool, and I'll draw across. Then I'm going to draw another rectangle over here and one in the middle. Okay, I'm not going to bother drawing this one because I'm actually going to mirror this rectangle on the left all the way over to the right. So let's get this bottom rectangle in place and to the correct size. So from the very back line or the bottom line, so its thickness is only 0.25. It's the same thickness of our backboard. It says the overall length of it is 27. And then it just needs to be centered. Okay. In order to center it, we can go to the far left edge. Make sure you're clicking on the correct edge. So it's the far left to this first vertical line. Okay, and that's going to be 1.875. And now it is centered on the top. Okay, and having that centered first is actually going to help us. So I'm going to hit Escape and get my line tool and check the box for construction. And you can do this in a lot of different ways, but the easiest way I think is just moving your mouse over this top line and that midpoint pops up. So if I select that midpoint and I draw up to the midpoint of this bottom line, hit Escape, then I make my construction line vertical, it automatically centers this rectangle to the overall top. And that's because this bottom piece where my back's going to go is already centered. So by this being a vertical line, this has to be centered. Okay, it's just a little trick there using a construction line. So now I can go about dimensioning these. So from the far left edge over to the first line here, it says that is 1.5. Okay, the overall thickness it shows for this middle piece, but the overall thickness of this is 0.75. The overall height is 10.5. And it's still blue. Find the measurement that keeps this from moving up and down. So if I bring this back over, that measurement is this 2 inches right here, and it says TYP because all 3 of these cutouts are all 2 inches, so they're all typically 2 inches away from the front. Now, when I say the front, this is actually a little confusing for us because we are drawing this upside down. So you can see this is the routed edge right here, or that edge that we use the swept cut. Basically the edge that has this fanciness on it. Okay, it is not from the edge that has that back piece. So when we dimension this, we are not going to be putting the 2 inches in here that we see. We're actually going to be doing it from way up here. So you want to go from the very top edge to that line, and that's going to be 2 inches because we're drawing this upside down. So now that rectangle is fully defined. So this is pretty easy. Let's select the vertical line of this middle rectangle and one of the vertical lines of the rectangle that's defined, and we'll make them equal. So now they're going to be the same height. We can select one of the horizontal lines and its opposing horizontal line. We can not only make them equal, but we can also make them collinear, so they're straight across from one another. And it will fully define that middle piece. So last but not least, we need to mirror that over. So go up to Mirror Entities, and it's going to be all 4 sides of this rectangle. The Mirror About line, if we zoom in, is going to be this construction line. And it's going to put the other one right over there. It's a green check. Okay. Now we can go to the Features tab and hit Extrude Cut. And we need to find that measurement. And that measurement is actually over here on this detail view. So this detail view is a little bit confusing, but see how this is detail B that is labeled from right here. So this is a side view. And what this is showing is 2 hidden lines. So this hidden line here, that's looking like that, and the view's cut off obviously. This section, or these 3 rectangles all lined up from the side view. This little piece, see it's labeled 0.25, is indicating that back sliver, that where the back piece is going to go. So the measurement we need is 0.375 up. That's how much we're going to cut this in, 0.375. So you can change your measurement to 0.375. Green check, and now that is finished. Okay, so 0.375 is exactly half of which is the thickness of this. So we're going to save this part as top. So File, Save As, and you can save this as top. Okay. Then we can close out. And I will start a new part. And now we're going to do the left side. So again, since this is a side, we can sketch on our side plane, so our right plane. This is going to be the left side. And I'll put my origin in the bottom left-hand corner. So I'm just going to use the line tool here. You can use that trick that I showed you earlier, a rectangle and a bunch of trimming, but I think it's kind of pointless to do it in this. I don't think it saves you more time. So I'm just going to use my line tool to kind of sketch this out. Okay, and if you're good with the arc, again, or with the line tool, you can wiggle over that dot, and it comes up. Wiggle over that dot so it turns into an arc. If you're not good with that, you can just use the 3-point arc. So you want a shape that somewhat looks like that. Don't worry about the stuff on the inside yet. Okay, so up here, you have 2 little cutouts. So we're going to select the bottom horizontal line, the bottom horizontal line of this one. We're going to make them collinear. And if I look at the picture, just to bring this over, you can see here it says this is 1 inch. And the back, this goes over 10.5, but the overall is 11.5. So that tells me that that is also 1 inch. So both of these cutouts are the same, so that means we can set these lines also to equal, and I can dimension one of them. Okay, that's going to be 1. So the overall height, so from the bottom, or from the top all the way down to the bottom, however you want to do that, that is going to be 30.875. And that should completely screw up your picture. Kind of grows that top part a lot. Okay, so now if we go to one of these horizontal lines in the bottom, that's going to be 30.5. should fix a lot of that. The overall width, so from the far left line to the far right line, the overall width is going to be 11.5. Should make a lot of the top black, fully defined, just this bottom part that's not. So I'm going to zoom into the bottom. First things first, let's make sure this line is a horizontal line and that it's tangent at both connection points. So if it's not, select the arc and the line, make it tangent, do it at both spots. I already have all of that set. It automatically did that for me. And these are perfect quarter circles, so that means this center point, hold it in shift, and this bottom horizontal line is going to be coincident, so it drops it down, and it automatically does that down here for the other one. Okay, so now we can go ahead and we can dimension some of this. So this arc and this arc should be set to equal. And the arc has a measurement of 2, so you can see there's like a detailed view to the far right on that page. That is 2. So from the front edge into this center point, that is going to be 3.75. 3.75. And from the front left, or the front edge, so the left edge, to the other center point, that is a total of 7. So when it does that, you see that it stretches this back part a little bit. So the reason why the back is a little bit wider than the front of these cutouts, just to kind of bring this back over and show you, it's actually because of that face frame piece. So you can kind of see it here in this picture. See the thickness there? That's what we're drawing. I know we're drawing this piece, but it's a mirror. And then you have the thickness here. Well, it's a little bit different, and the difference is actually 0.75, which is the thickness of this face frame. So when you have that face frame on there, from the side view, the distance from the very front to this cutout is the same as that one. So we're actually compensating for the face frame that we're going to attach later on. So just to kind of show you, that's 0.375, or this is 1.75. This is actually 2.5. So 1.75 plus 0.75 is 2.5. A lot of math there at one. So we have that whole thing. I think the easiest way for students to do this would be just to extrude this. So I'll go to the Features tab and hit Extrude. I'm going to make that 0.75 thick. Okay. Now I'm going to sketch on this inside surface. Okay. And now I can draw those other lines. So there is a rectangle. It comes down the whole back. So I'll select there and just kind of come down to about here and stop. Go from that corner over to the front. And there's another one in the middle. Okay, now you can see they're divided. So let's get our trim entities. Trim there. Let's trim here. So 2 clicks because there's 2 lines on top of one another. All right. The only thing I see that might cause us problems is this dot, because this is 2 lines now instead of 1. So what I would like to do to fix that is just select that dot, select this vertical line, and let's make them coincident. So it thinks that they are lined up. Okay. Now we can go ahead and dimension this. And this is actually all on the top view. So from the far left to this line right here, it says is 11.25, meaning that the space that's left here is 0.25 because the overall width was 11.5. And that's just enough for our back piece to slide in there. So from the bottom to this first line, it says it's 3.25, and from the bottom to the next line is 4. So I'm sure you're good enough to do that math, but that is 0.75 in between because that is our bottom shelf that's going to fit in there. So from the bottom up to this line here is going to be 16.5. And from the bottom up to the next line is going to be 17.25, so 17.25. So that is now fully defined. So we go to the Features tab and Cut Extrude, and we are going to cut that in a total of 0.375, half the distance. So all of it gets cut in, 0.375. Okay. I can see that on my right view, 0.375. Shows where those cutouts are. So this part is now done. This is the left side. So we are going to save this. So File, Save As, and let's name this left side. Okay, I'm going to close out of this part. And if I'm looking ahead here, it says for the right side, it's a mirror image of the left. So it said, see left side for measurements, but you really do not need that. And this is why. So at the very beginning, I explained that we're going to do some cabinetry design. So first off, if you haven't already noticed, you see all these little cutouts. We're kind of figuring out how the other pieces are going to interlock, go inside of the side walls. We're not just going to butt join them or lean them up against and run a screw through. They're actually going to sit inside the side pieces and get glued in there. So that's a little bit of cabinet design. So the next thing we're doing here is mirroring an assembly part. So not just a normal part, an assembly part. So at this point, we're actually going to start our assembly. So let's hit New and Assembly. First part we want to bring in is just the top. Okay, we're not going to confuse ourselves with bringing in all of this. The top. And when you bring that in, it's going to fix that because that's going to be the only one. And now we'll insert, and we're going to bring in the left side. So notice I did them separate. If you brought these two in together, then you're going to want to actually right-click and float the side, and you would right-click and fix the top. Because it comes in alphabetical, so the left side would come in first, and whatever your first one is automatically fixed. Okay, so this is in the correct orientation as well. As you can see, this little back sliver is towards the back. So let's go ahead and mate this. So I'm just going to hit mate. And the top of this top sliver, not here, the top part, and if you rotate around underneath, it goes right up inside of there. So make sure you're clicking on the correct parts. So now that's the correct height. Okay, and this can still move left and right. So I'm going to select this inside wall, rotate around, and it would touch that wall right there. So now left and right, it's good. And you would think that you would just go from the front, but I think it's easiest if you just rotate around from the back. That way you're not mistakenly clicking on something of that fillet or the swept cut edge. So the flat back here of the top and this back piece, and it slides right in. Green check. Now that this is fully mated, I want to rotate around here, and I want to show you why we made some of the things the way we did. So you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but you can just watch the screen. But if you want to learn something new, you can as well. So I'm actually going to select this surface, and up here where this little bar is that goes across, about the fourth icon in, it says Section View. So a section view is when we temporarily remove some of the material so that we can see inside. So when I click on that, and I rotate to the side, there's a little arrow. I'm just going to drag this backwards just a hair. Okay, what I want to see is this gap here, and then hit the green check. So it's going to look like you cut some of your project off, like some of this part off. But it's just a temporary thing, just a viewing thing. So I wanted to show you this because if you look inside of here, you might be wondering, well, why is there this humongous gap? Why isn't this just cut perfect? Well, there's an actual explanation for this. So this is kind of hard to demonstrate unless I had a real picture of it. But maybe I can just explain. So the CNC machine uses a round cutting blade. Okay, it's a round bit. So it's like a drill bit basically with a flat end. So it does not have the ability to make these perfect square corners on the inside. So what you have to kind of picture here is for it to do this corner, for it to cut out this corner on the top, it's going to actually be rounded like this. Okay, it's going to have like a 1/4 inch round because the bit we would probably use is a 1/4 inch in diameter. So that means it would have a 1/4 inch round. So it would kind of be rounded here. All right, and same thing with this piece. It would kind of be rounded to about here. So there's a tiny little bit in between those rounds where those rounds would not hit one another. Now, yes, you could chisel those out or, file them out. But if you want to just take this off the CNC and just put this together right away like a puzzle, you need to actually compensate for the I guess, mistake or for the machining of the CNC, which is going to be this little round bit. So we have these gaps in here because in reality you'd have a curve here, and there's kind of just enough space there for it to have a little bit of wiggle room and for some glue to be inserted in there as well. So that is why we made that like that. So now that we have this left side on, and again, sorry, if you didn't turn off your section view, you can turn off your section view now. But now that we have this in, now we are actually going to go through the process of what this says here. It says making, or mirroring, sorry, an assembly part. So mirroring an assembly part. So in the past, I'm sure a lot of you would have tried to put a plane and you try to mirror this over. Again, I don't want you to do this, but I will just show you here. If I actually went to plane, reference geometry plane, and I made a plane in the middle, which again, this is not what we're going to be doing, okay? If I try to put a plane in the middle, and I try to mirror this part across that plane, you'll see how it messes up, okay? So when I do that, see how it puts the back here. Okay, well, we don't want the back there. We want it back here. So it's not necessarily the mirrored image that we want. In this case, it is just like a mirror. It reflects it, but it kind of rotates it as well. So that is not what we want to do. What we actually want is a completely new part. Now, yes, you could go through and hit a new part file and make an all new part. But the easier way of actually doing this, which is a little bit of a trick, I've never showed you this before, open this part up by itself. So you could right click and hit open part if you don't already have it open. And when it opens, you need to select the surface that you want to mirror it across. So in this case, we want to mirror to the right, not to the left. So we're going to click this inside wall, the side that has these cutouts. So I'm just going to click on that, and then I'm going to go up to insert, and halfway down, there's mirror part. Okay, and it's got a whole bunch of different settings over here. Just hit the green check. And what happens is it mirrors this entire thing. And as you can see, the back is towards the back where we want it. Okay, this is made specifically for assemblies and doing what we are doing right now. So this right now says left side mirrored. So what we want to do is hit File, Save As, and we are going to change this to right side. Okay. Now we can close out of this part, and back at our assembly, we can hit Insert Component, and we can insert the right side. And now this is a perfect mirrored image with the back cut out towards the back. So go ahead and mate this in just like we did before. So up underneath the surface that it's going to touch, and the top of it, green check. Okay, the surface inside wall of this piece, rotate around, and the little inside piece that it would touch, green check. And then again, you can rotate around to the back. You can do the back of the top and the back of your piece. Now you could also mate this thing to your other side, so the bottoms could be flush, the backs could be flush. That's easy as well. Okay, green check. So now this thing is in here perfect. All right, so let's go ahead and bring in our back piece. This thing just gets inserted right in there. So I'm just going to select the back of it and the very back of one of my side pieces so that they are flush, green check. Select the top of this and rotate around up underneath the piece that it's going to touch, which is right here. So it's got the correct height. And then the side to the side. Okay, so it slides over. Now that back piece is inserted in there perfect. And yeah, there is a little gap down here at the bottom. That's how a lot of furniture is made. Okay, so the back is now in there. So this is where I would like to save just in case things go crazy or delete, or sometimes SOLIDWORKS likes to crash. So this is our storage cubby. And from here, we see the next little thing that we're going to learn is making parts in an assembly. Okay, making parts in an assembly. So we are moving on to creating the shelves now. Okay, the bottom shelf and the middle shelf. So to create these, you could make new part files. These are pretty easy to make, but of course I want to teach you something new. So up here where it says insert component, there's a little drop down and it says new part. So this is asking us right now, where do we want to make a new part, on what surface? I am going to click on this front edge of one of my side pieces. Okay, so it kind of grays out everything or puts everything else in wireframe, and you are now creating a part file. You can see your menu changed up here at the top. So I'm going to hit Control 8, which is normal too, so Control 8, and that gives me this nice side view here. And the next part we are actually creating is the bottom shelf, not the middle shelf, the bottom shelf. So the bottom shelf fits right in here in this gap. So I'm just going to get my rectangle tool. I'll zoom in. And the nice thing with making parts in the assembly is you have all the other parts to kind of connect to. So I went from that corner to its opposite corner. Okay. And now this is fully defined with no measurements whatsoever, even though, just to double check here, this is 27 long, just to show you, this is going to be 27 long. Okay, so even though we didn't put any measurements in, it is fully defined. We can go to the Features tab and hit Extrude. And when I rotate around here, you can see the direction that you're extruding. If you change the direction, okay, so it's going backwards, and you change it from blind to up to surface, it's going to go back until it hits this piece. So it's asking us what surface. So if you click on the back, it's going to extrude until it hits that. Then you can hit the green check. Okay, so there is our bottom shelf. We just need to have that cut out now. So you could have done this all in that sketch, but I kind of forgot. So I'm going to select Sketch, click on this front surface here, and I just need to have a rectangle for this to get cut out. So I'm just going to use my rectangle tool. And if you select the top line and you move your mouse over it, you'll see the yellow dot in the middle pops up. So I'm just going to select that dot now. Hold in Shift and select the top of this piece, and we can actually set it to midpoint. And what it'll do is it'll take that midpoint and lock it into the midpoint of that top line. So it kind of centers it. Now we can go ahead and dimension this, and this thing is 3/4 of an inch wide, so 0.75. And it only goes down 0.375. 0.375. It goes down half. Remember, these are the same measurements we've been using the entire time, because that is the material thickness is 0.75 for that middle shelf, and it's going down halfway. Extrude, or our Features tab, Extrude Cut, and we can hit Through All. Okay, it'll go through our part. We can hit the green check. So I believe now that is the bottom shelf. That is all done. Okay, so up here in the top right, there's Return for Part. And there's our part. Let's do the same thing here for the middle shelf. So Insert, New Part. Select on that front surface. Control 8, so it goes to the flat view. Rectangle here. Go from corner to corner. Features tab, Extrude. I'm going to change this from blind to up to surface. If I rotate around, I can click on the back wall. Green check. And now we need those holes in the middle. So if I look back at this, there's some odd holes here in the middle. Okay, so this is actually where I am planning on showing you how to isolate a part. Okay, isolate a part. So right now you still have all of this other stuff. We need to sketch in the middle. This cut was pretty easy because we could just cut it right through, but sketching right in the middle means you're going to be looking through a whole bunch of stuff. So the easy way of doing this, if you right click on this part, there's isolate, and it will temporarily turn off or hide everything else. Okay, so there's this little box up here. We're going to move out of our way, and now we can sketch on this flat surface, and now we just need to draw those 3 rectangles. So I'll just get the rectangle tool, draw 3 rectangles here. And let's look back at our picture. Our picture shows that A, B, and C all equal one another, so the lengths of these are all the same. The thickness here is obviously going to be 0.75. It does have the measurements from one side to the other, and it looks like there is an inch in between the whole way up. Okay, so let's hit escape off of our rectangle tool. I'm going to select, by holding in shift, the 3 left side lines. I'm going to make them collinear and equal, okay, so that they're all lined up, collinear and equal. And I'm going to get my dimension tool, and from this side to that first line, if we look at that measurement here, this is what we're doing, 13.125, 13.125. I'll change my decimal places so you can see it. If you want to follow the picture, you can. So from the left side all the way to the right side, that's going to be 13.875. You could also just set one of these to 0.75 because they're all 3/4 of an inch thick. Okay, so we only made the left side collinear. We did not make the right side collinear. So now we can go ahead and do that. Select all 3 of those, make them collinear. Now we just need to change the spacing in between. So you could dimension 1 inch all the way down through. What I like to do is actually get construction lines, and I draw from the end to here, and I just put construction lines in between. The reason I do that is because I try to stay away from putting as many dimensions in as possible. That way, if you ever change something, it will automatically change all your other parts as well. So these are all 1 inch. So if I select all 4 of these and set them to equal, okay, it'll space them all out, and now all I have to do is dimension one of them to 1 inch, and automatically changes the rest. Okay, so now we can go to the Features tab and Extrude Cut, and let's change this from blind to through all, and hit the green check. Okay, now that we're done with this part, we can hit Exit Isolate, and it comes back to seeing everything. We can hit Return from Part, and now we have our middle shelf. So let's save these, and the way of saving these first is if we come over here and we right click on the first part that we made, there should be Rename Part, and that's going to be Bottom Shelf. And we can right click on the last one we've named or made, and that's going to be Middle Shelf. Now we can go ahead and save our assembly. Okay, you hit Save All. And it's going to ask you if you want internal or external parts. So if you do internal, it's only going to be inside the assembly. They're not going to be individual part files. If you want it to be external, so they have their own part files, you hit external. Well, we actually do want these external, and I'm going to explain why later on. So set them to external, and you can hit OK. And now we have those saved as well. So bringing this document back over, you can now see we actually have all of our parts made. This bottom part here is just like an extra thing that we're going to be doing later. So we can actually go ahead and finish our assembly. So let's go up to Insert Component, and let's bring in our dividers first. So we need our bottom divider and our middle divider. Or top divider, sorry. So bottom divider and top divider. And I'm going to hold in Control, not Shift, because Shift will select all of those. Hold in Control, and you'll select both of them at the same time. Okay, that's our bottom, and this is our top. So I'll get my Mate tool, and I'll select the side wall of this and the side that it's going to touch in this little cutout. Green check. Front wall of this and the front wall of the bottom shelf. So it slides back, green check. And then you're going to have to probably drag this up a little bit. Okay, so I just clicked and held and drug, and then where it goes onto. So in between and green check. So notice I did this all off the bottom, and the top automatically goes together. Now this is another little intricate thing that you can kind of see. So remember we talked about before of the bit the CNC is going to have and how it has to have a little bit of excess here. So I'm going to turn my top off just for explanation reasons so that you can see there's some excess here. So there would be a little rounded edge because it cannot make that squared off corner of this piece. Okay, it can't make this. So this is actually rounded right here. So for this piece to fit in here, there needs to be a little bit of excess. And we actually have this only going up part way because the next part's going to fit right on top as well. Okay, so I'm going to turn my top back on. I turned that off on accident. And we can go ahead and mate this. So mate, I'll select the side wall of this. And I'm actually just going to do the side of this piece because it's already set to being even with those. It's just a lot easier to click. I'll also do the front of this and the front of this piece. A lot easier to click. And now it just needs to be drug up. So while it's in this kind of position, I'll click here, rotate around to where it's going to be touching, and it slides right up in there. Okay. So now we have kind of the dividers all in place. The last thing that we need to do is put the face frame pieces in. So let's go up to Insert Component, and we need to find our face frame pieces. So we should have 4 of them. So I'm just going to hold in Shift and select all of them and hit Open. And here I can kind of just place them in. This is our horizontal one. This is our kick plate. Here's the vertical one. And here's the vertical that goes in the middle. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to put on is the easiest one, and the easiest one for me that I would say is just going to be this tall vertical one. That's going to help us have our spacing, okay, our tall vertical one. So it's going to be flush with the outside here. So get your mate tool. We can click the wall that it's going to touch, rotate around, it's going to touch back here, green check. Outside to outside, so there to there, green check, and then the bottom to the bottom. And again, this hides that piece of plywood, hides the edge of the plywood. So now this is perfect, it's all set in there. So now we can put our kick plate, that goes right up there. So the front of this to the front of this, green check. Okay, the side of it to the side that it's going to be touching. So right in here, so it slides over. And then the bottom to the bottom. And it slides up in place, as you can see. Now, like I said, this helped us with spacing. So we can put this piece in next. So we'll do the front of the shelf, rotate around, do the back of this piece, green check. And again, yeah, you can do the front of it, the outside, like we were doing before. That's probably easier. So from there to here, so it slides on over. Green check, and I'm not going to set a height yet, so it can only slide up and down. That's going to be determined by this spacing. So let's do this piece next. So the front of that to the front of this. Okay, green check. Sorry, I'm at a weird angle here. So just made the front of these even. Okay, this slides up. I'm going to do in between the two so that they touch. Right now, these pieces can still slide up and down and left and right. So going back to this picture, you can actually see the horizontal bars. There's 2 of them. There's one up underneath this lip, which is hard to see in this current view. So we can either insert a new one of these, or if you hold in Control on your keyboard, you click and hold on this part. Notice I'm not on the mate tool right now, and you just drag out. It does copy that. So now we can insert that part, or mate that part. So we'll select the front of that, select the front of this, so that they're even. You can rotate around, select the ends of these 2 horizontal face frame pieces. Drag this one all the way up. And this is going to go in between, so almost like if you were acting like you were putting glue. So underneath and where it touches, green check. And now this entire piece is going to go up and lock into right there. So if you go underneath your top and on top of this piece, it will go up, green check, and you can see here it's perfectly spaced, so it gives you a little bit of overhang, and it's flush there as well, so you can slide something in or out. So this piece can still move left or right. We'll do that towards the end. And we need our vertical piece here. So I'm going to get off my mate constraint, or mate tool, holding control on your keyboard and drag the other big vertical one to this side. And now we can mate that. So the front to the front, green check, outside of our side piece to the outside of this, green check, and then underneath. Almost looks like we know what we're doing. Everything's kind of perfect in here. All right, so the last part that we need to do is bring this one in. So hold in control on your keyboard and copy that off. Go ahead and mate this. So the front to the front, green check. We'll do the side to the side of these two. And then let's go down here and up underneath. So that piece slides down into place. So now the only thing we need to do is center this thing up. So to do that, let's look at how wide that is. So that's 1 1/4, okay? And the piece that it's blocking is 3/4 of an inch. So if you do that math in your head, you have $1.25 minus 75 cents, you have 50 cents left. Okay, so if we need to split this and make this even, that means we're not going to line them up perfect this way. We're actually going to have to be offset on either side 1/4 of an inch. So if I select this inside wall and I select the side of this, it's going to make them flush, but instead of hitting the green check, we're going to come over here and hit the distance tool. Okay, this is offset distance, and we're going to set that to 0.25. And you want to make sure that it goes the correct direction, that it's not way out here, that it is actually covering that middle divider, that bottom divider. Okay, then you can hit the green check, and now that is centered. And since we made the left side of the top one and the bottom one even, this is now fully mated. It's fully defined, and it's all finished. So let's save this assembly